following content may contain mature themes and depictions of reported criminal violence. Listener discretion is advised.
And welcome to Dark Dish Radio on this lovely whatever day it is.
Whatever it is. I'm trying to cover up my pets right now because they're making noises.
Cover her pets. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
We have quite a few animals between us, you know.
We do. We're animal lovers.
Animal lovers. Not so much people.
No.
But animals. Which is the whole idea behind this channel. No, that sounds terrible. Focusing on... Notice we don't do animal stories. Just people stories.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. And do you ever notice that when you're watching a movie and something terrible happens to an animal, you have a much more visceral response than when something happens to a person?
Totally. I mean, I'll watch something. I saw something the other night and it was absolutely horrible. And I thought, oh no, not the dog.
Yeah. They're the innocent ones.
Right. Like, it was a horrible, I don't remember what it was, but many people were in a lot of trouble. And all I was concerned about was the safety of the dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fine. That's what we're into. And we do enjoy sharing these strange, sordid tales of cold cases and other paranormal oddities on this channel. And again, we started out on the radio. And who knows the future? We might end up there again too someday. But for now.
Right. Well, what year was that? Back in 1920, I think it was. No, it was like 2012.
Who knows? We'll figure that. Who knows?
I don't know. I had a brain tumor in between, so I can't remember yesterday. And I mean it. There are times I can't remember yesterday.
Well, this is certainly good. This is a certainly curative kind of show for anything that ails you.
Right.
And, if you're having a bad day.
That's right. And I think that we need to preface what we did before, which was we're not making light of these cases. We are finding some levity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because let's face it, this is heavy stuff. These are heavy subjects. Many of these are cold cases. Some will not be. Some are solved, which is great. But the cases are so heavy that we try to not inject humor or anything into the case themselves, but to start and end the show with a little bit of, lightness.
A little bit of lightness, yeah.
A little bit of lightness, because it is heavy stuff. But all due respect always given to the victims and their loved ones. This particular episode is about the death of Cindy James. And this is a particularly baffling case, in my estimation. I think you agree on that.
I do. I don't think, and I've seen, I've heard a lot of things, there's a lot of cases gone through like a regular crime buff, but this is really, it almost feels otherworldly at times, like paranormal. And I think, okay, no, let's stay on track. Let's stay with the evidence. But it gets where it's so weird that there really aren't any answers and it's still left up in the air. In fact, I think at the end, after her death, wasn't there an inquisition into what happened? And even the jury couldn't come up with. They had no clue. Up in the air.
It truly is a question mark kind of case. And with all due respect to her mental health, her state of mind, did that play a role? Is there more to it? Was there someone out there, or is there still someone out there who basically made her look like she was paranoid, imagining things. We'll get into that. To start out, I will start by saying that Cindy was born in June of 1944, and at that time, as she grew up, I will say this, she became a preschool administrator for troubled youth. And that's what she would ultimately end up doing. But she first graduated from nursing school before that in 1966. And as far as her upbringing, she had, I think, kind of an average upbringing. She was one of 6 kids. Her parents, both of them were Russian. And she did spend her teenage years partially in Ottawa because her father was in the Air Force. So she was there, but there was a time when her family was in France. They had briefly relocated to France. And while she was there, something interesting would happen. And I feel like this maybe set the tone for the rest of Cindy's life. Because while she's in France, she keeps telling her parents that she has this suitor. That it was this intern she had met during her studies there in France. And that she had this suitor, and they never met this person. Okay, they never met this man she referred to. At one point, she even said they were engaged to be married. But
I didn't know this part.
Well, this is why I say I feel like something got the ball rolling at this point in Cindy's life. Whether that's in her defense or pointing out maybe some strange tendencies we see here. But she eventually says that this man has terminal cancer. They've called off the wedding, and he had taken his own life.
Weird. Okay. Yeah,
so,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the weird thing is, not only through all that did her parents not meet him, she never even gave his name.
Oh my.
Nor did her siblings ever meet this person. Something to just keep in mind here. Now, in the summer of 1965 is when she would end up meeting Roy Makepeace. What's interesting to me about that is he's actually a South African doctor. He was almost 20 years older than Cindy. And they would get married in 1966. That's the same year that she would end up graduating from nursing school. But apparently, Cindy's parents were not thrilled about this. I think because of the age difference, as I understand it.
Right. I can see that.
And I think you had mentioned that, didn't her parents contact him at some point? Or is that later on in her experience?
Well, once they found out that she had married Roy, they wrote him a letter letting him know of their disdain for the situation. And sure enough, it turned out Roy finds out that Cindy wrote it herself.
I see. Interesting. Well, that's another good thing to make note of here then, as we're going through this adventure here of Cindy's life, because that's really what it is. She's already on this roller coaster, and it's just begun. Cindy, at some point in this relationship, would say that he was abusing her, that Roy was abusing her. Yes, and so he was having trouble getting his license in South Africa. They end up in British Columbia. So this is where they go, and she's a pediatric nurse at this point. She's working in Vancouver.
Right.
And I think in around the early 1970s, he takes a job as director of health services or something. And in 1975, she's hired at this facility that caters to children that have behavioral disorders. And she worked there for, I think, 10, 12 years, something of that nature. And they said that she was very professional. She was well liked. She was well regarded.
Yeah, I saw that that she loved kids. However, she didn't have any of her own.
Right.
She really enjoyed working with children.
Yeah. And that's true, because she would have no children with Roy. And by 1982, she and Roy have gone their separate ways. And this is when things really take a turn. Again, we go back to France, the strange suitor no one ever meets. He inexplicably takes his own life. No one knew his name, strange enough. Now she meets Roy. She's making allegations about him possibly abusing her, yet still, stays in the marriage for some time, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And according to what you just mentioned, also, she's apparently being dishonest about this communication between her parents and him.
Yeah, so weird. So
So
weird.
that's strange too, right. So now we're in 1982. Cindy will start telling people that there's a prowler around her house, that there's somebody coming around her house. And within about 4 months of first telling people this, she says that she's now getting these bizarre phone calls. And that in these phone calls, this person is speaking sometimes in different voices. Sometimes the calls are sexual in nature. Sometimes they're violent. And I think sometimes they're both.
Okay.
I think that at one point she gets a message that says something like, "I'll get you one night, Cindy."
Oh, it's terrifying.
And so she would contact the police and let them know. So the police, this is the beginning of a very long relationship they will end up having with Cindy. Because as we tell this story, you will see that they ended up spending endless hours on this case.
Yeah, and I believe there were over 100 or close to 100 witnesses as well. If
A
not
lot of, right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of witnesses. And so keep in mind these phone calls. Now, at some point throughout this time, Cindy says, "Hey, my porch light has been broken. I am finding random people on my property at night. We don't know who these people are." She just says there's these random people on my property at night. That her lights are being smashed, her phone lines cut at certain times. She's finding dead animals in her yard. She said that she found a dog that was partially strangled.
I think that dog was hers.
That very well could be. That very well could be.
Yeah.
And, it was around this time that her good friend Agnes said that Agnes herself witnessed these very, as I refer to them, traditional ransom style letters with the cutout, letters on her doorstep. But unfortunately, there are so many reports at this point, and I don't really know exactly how many up to this point, but there are already in the story so many reports that the police are starting to become suspicious of this. Doubtful, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. An interesting fact. I just want to interject something here.
Sure.
A few years ago, I heard that those block letters, like out of the magazines, when people will send letters that consist of those, it turns out that the majority of those letters, and I mean a high majority, are written by women.
Interesting.
And I never forgot that, because I thought, gee, you see this throughout all these shows that you watch, and whether they're true or not, yes, documentaries or things like that. And it turns out the majority of those letters written in that fashion are from women.
Interesting. Well, that seems like something we would do.
Yeah, we're a little creative. Little arts and crafts.
Yes, that's very theatrical of us. A guy would take a Sharpie and say, "Hey," but we have a little more flair, I guess, about, or those who are more feminine. We just tend to, I don't know, that just seems to be a feminine quality, but yeah, very strange. Well, again, at this point, these police are a little bit suspicious, or as my daughter would say, sus. They're thinking that something may be dubious about this. So now we fast forward to January of 83. And Agnes comes over one night, her good friend. But when she gets there, Cindy doesn't come to the door. And Agnes ends up finding Cindy in the yard with a nylon, the first of many, tied around her neck. And Cindy says that she simply went out to the garage to get something, and someone grabbed her, apparently from behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this would start this part of the story as well, because again, this is the first of many instances like this. So she ends up moving to a new house at that point and changes her name.
Mm-hmm. And I think she painted her car, didn't she?
I think, yes, I think I read
Mm-hmm.
that as well. And
Yeah.
and this is around the time when she decides, that's it, I'm hiring a private investigator. So she hires this PI. Once again, the cops are questioning this. The police are uncertain. But the private investigator says he does not believe Cindy is telling the entire story. He thought she was withholding information.
See, now I thought it was somebody else.
Well,
We'll
the
cut
plot
this out.
thickens. Yes. The
You guys
plot will
don't have your
thicken here.
stories straight. I think
We read
I
two
think
completely different stories.
I think there, obviously there were many players in this story, and I think that
Yes.
a lot of them at one point or another felt that way.
Yes,
Uh,
we will find out that her parents are some of those people as well. But initially, from what I researched, the PI said he felt that she was withholding facts, and he had a reason for feeling that way. I should say that he felt she had a reason for withholding the information. She ends up taking a polygraph, and the polygraph, the examiner, the person that gave her the test, said she was not being forthright in her.
interesting.
Now, we know that polygraphs don't hold up in court, so some would
Right.
say, what's the point of them? But let's be honest, when you hear that someone's failed one, you instantly become a little bit dubious.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that Cindy failed her polygraph, but they said she was withholding information. So it almost makes me feel as though she kind of got a 50-50 response.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It could have been just uh what do they call it? So it wasn't a yes or a no,
right.
basically. Okay. Okay.
It was somewhere in the middle, which really makes the whole thing kind of futile at that point.
Right. Sure.
Um,
Which is the
but
entire case, it feels like.
exactly. But Cindy's mom would say, no, it's because she's afraid for her family. She is lying, as the PI had insinuated. Not necessarily lying, but she's withholding information because she's protecting us. She knows more than she wants to
Oh,
say because she's protecting us. They really believe that.
wow. Okay. Interesting.
Now we're in January of 84. And this private investigator had given Cindy a two-way radio. I think he probably thought maybe that would give her a little feeling of comfort to know that she had another way of contacting, because remember, historically, her phone lines keep getting cut.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So if this person is still, or people, whomever, are still harassing her or stalking her, maybe this will help her should an emergency occur. So in January of 84, this private investigator hears noises over this two-way radio at night. And he goes to her house, door's locked. But he looks in the window, he sees her lying on the floor, and she seems to have a knife stuck in the middle of her hand, like her hand has been impaled by this knife. And this, once again, ransom style letter says, now you must die, expletive, expletive, expletive. So she goes to the hospital and says she was attacked and she had a needle inserted into her arm.
Oh boy.
No suspects. Nobody. No clue. Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Didn't she have a composite drawn at one point of the person she saw?
Was that the time when the composite was drawn? That may be.
I don't know, because just like you and just like everybody who's trying to keep up with this case, you'll have to forgive me, that may be a different time. So,
Well, we will certainly share that here with you because, as Amy said, yes, apparently she did have a composite done on this perpetrator, this attacker, this whomever this person was. But again, no suspects. And any phone calls she still says she's receiving are, strangely enough, too short to trace.
Okay.
So,
Well, and I want to interject something as well. This was in 82, so I want to go back a little bit. Police officer Pat McBride
mhm.
actually moved in with her, and they became romantically involved.
Yes.
Yep. And so at one point, Pat McBride saw, now I don't know if he'd moved in at this point or not, but he had found her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, outside. Of course, she would keep Roy up on everything as far as this person, these people,
Sure.
whomever it was. And so the officer said to him, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm just here to protect her." He had a gun on him. But no, he had moved in with her at that point. So he told Roy, "Listen, I'm living with her now," and Roy didn't come back, to keep an eye out. But
Right.
that was interesting, that the fact that the cop moved in with her, and then sure enough, they became romantically involved, and that would end amicably, and they would stay.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And at the end of this entire experience, that officer was exonerated, I guess, as we could put it, from
mhm.
having anything to do with this, because for a time they were suspicious of him as well.
Right, because nothing happened in the home then either when he was there.
Exactly. No, nothing.
I don't think there might have been a couple times when there were phone cords cut or something along those
Sure.
lines, but nothing major.
Well, and
Yeah.
again, this story is so complicated because these things, according to Cindy, happened all the time. Like we can't keep up with how often this was said to happen. These
Right.
letters or these calls or these things being broken, things of this nature. But at this point, there's 24 hour surveillance done on her house. Nothing. Sometimes there are as many as 14 police officers. But as soon as the surveillance is gone, she will be attacked. 5 separate attacks as soon as the surveillance ends.
Yeah, and you
According
got
to
to wonder, is the person watching out? Do they know
Right.
if there is a person? Are they seeing that there's a police presence there? Is it all in her
Well,
head? Is it a
that's a
cop?
good point. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point because the cops don't believe her. But to your point, her parents said exactly that. They said the attacker is doing this on purpose so that no one will believe her. The attacker knows when the surveillance is ending. They're watching this. They know.
Right. And then her ex-husband had received 2 phone calls himself. And
Yes.
yep, and so we're going to play that right here. Okay, so to me, that does not sound like a female voice. However, I know, being on the air myself, playing certain characters, I can throw my voice.
Right.
Uh,
That's
so
true.
and it's almost a whispered form. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
I'm not sure either. And again, there are a lot of these phone calls. And at this point, now we're up to December of 1985. Cindy is found partially unconscious in a ditch that is approximately 6 miles from her home.
Mm.
This is where it gets even stranger, if that's possible. She is wearing a man's work boot, a glove. She's hypothermic. She has a black stocking around her neck. She has a needle mark in her arm. She has no memory of how she got there or what happened to her. Nothing. And her friend Agnes at that point, and Agnes's husband say that's it, and they move in with her. So presumably her relationship with the police officer has now ended at this point because they move
Right.
in.
Yeah.
And around, I think it was April of 1986, one night, Agnes's husband hears noises. He gets up and their basement is on fire.
Mm.
The fire is coming up from the basement. He would say that he saw a man outside who was just standing there in the corner. And so Agnes's husband would yell out, "Call the fire department." because apparently they couldn't use their phone. And the man would simply run away. He just runs away.
Ugh.
Whoever he is. Again, this is according to Agnes's husband. The police say this was staged. This is staged. There are no fingerprints. The fire was set inside the house. So, once again, they don't believe her.
Right.
I think it's around this time that Cindy is committed. A doctor commits her. 10 weeks later, she leaves the hospital. And her dad says, I'm telling you, Cindy knows more than she's saying. And in October of 1988 is when Roy would start getting these answering machine messages, one in particular saying, quote, Cindy is dead meat soon. So if Roy was getting calls before that, I know at least in October of 88, he had still received a phone message regarding his ex-wife.
And that one, the one that was played could have been from that time.
It may be.
Yeah. I think I had read that he had received at least 2.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so in that same month, so this would be October 26th of 1988, Cindy is attacked after work one night. They find her unconscious in her car. Now she's nude from the waist down. She has a nylon around her neck. Her arms and legs are hogtied with other nylon. She has duct tape on her mouth. She's in a coma.
Yeah.
And she survives.
Crazy.
So I can't imagine at this point what the police are thinking. I have to be honest. I imagine that they're just kind of over this whole thing. Seriously. You know, with all due respect to Cindy and her family, I just think they're thinking, we're finding nothing and no one. And not because it doesn't mean they don't exist. They're just not having any luck finding this person.
Well, but I'll be honest, the police, I think it was the time that, I think his name, the private investigator's name was Caban, Ozzy Caban. And when he found her in her house, when the knife was through her hand, the police didn't even go to the lengths of even fingerprinting anything. And that to me is something that they should have done. And I don't think they should have said, okay, we just give up after a while. No, I would keep going.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for Cindy, no matter what the truth is, I think they were just so over this at this point that they weren't really putting a lot of,
Right.
I think especially after having so many officers and 24-hour surveillance, and in their estimation, receiving nothing that they felt was.
Sure.
So, well, now we're up to spring of 1989. The attacks have decreased at this point. Cindy would tell people she's feeling better. And then we get to May 25th of 89. This is 6 years after that first call. Cindy disappears. Now, her neighbor sees her car in a parking lot. They get to this parking lot. There are groceries inside, and there's a wrapped gift in her car. There is blood on the driver's side door. There's her wallet underneath the car. And 2 weeks later, her body is found in an abandoned home that happens to be approximately 1 kilometer from this same shopping plaza. And Cindy is dead. She has a black stocking around her neck. Her legs and her feet are bound behind her back. Now, the autopsy would say that she overdosed on morphine, flurazepam, other drugs. Her hands were bound, and we should say that one finger had scratched another down to the bone.
Right.
Now,
right.
I mean, that's pretty, but the cops say it was suicide. It was suicide.
Well, and I think that they had talked to a not expert that said that there is no way she could have tied herself up like that. And I can't tell if I didn't hear, I should say, I didn't read anything, that if she was hogtied behind her back, I think she was.
Yes, she was. As from what I understand, she was hogtied behind her back. And that is very curious. And also, could someone in a heightened emotional state scratch a finger down to the bone? I suppose, but wow, that seems really excessive to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now, here's another strange thing. Apparently, her, quote, father, and I'm saying that for a reason, called the insurance company before she died asking about life insurance.
Oh, now, and I didn't know that.
Yes, her parents would vehemently deny this. He said, I never called anybody about this. And the private investigator we've been mentioning did not think Cindy could have staged this. But the Vancouver Police Department considered it a, quote, unknown event. That's how they qualified it, an unknown event.
Yeah, and I think that's when the court, again, when they went to court afterwards, the inquiry, they came to the same conclusion. The jury, they came to the same conclusion.
Now, at one point, Cindy did see a hypnotherapist, and the hypnotherapist would say that Cindy said she had regressed witnessing a double murder at some point in her life.
Interesting. I didn't know that either. And she did have to be admitted twice. And on that second visit, they diagnosed her with a myriad of mental health issues, including schizophrenia.
See, that's why this is so, and as you and I had discussed earlier, as you are looking at some of these things as we talk, some of these are very suspicious to me. Particularly this Valentine, some of these letters that she would receive, they don't feel authentic to me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I admit that at the same time, I can't explain how somebody could have done some of these things to themselves. If anything, they would have needed help. And what would have been the end game in that? What would have been the point, I guess?
Right. And that's where it's like we're very skeptical. We also are paranormal investigators, but were times when I was questioning, was this a tulpa? Was this something she created mentally?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Simply, and no, I don't go there. Obviously, this was probably more than likely done by herself, by Cindy. But there's enough shadiness in police departments where I do have to wonder about that one officer. I'm not accusing him. I'm just wondering.
Sure.
Pat McBride, or any person in the law enforcement community in that area. I don't know. It's beyond weird.
It's one of the strangest cases I've personally ever heard about. Not the strangest, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah, and I wonder, do they have DNA? It was in 1989, and I didn't realize it was just, of course, I'm sure people will be like, oh, it was a long time ago. Not for you and me. We were,
right.
We remember 1989. Well, it wasn't that long ago. So I would hope that they had saved something from her clothing, her.
Yes, that's true.
She had also, on one of these attacks, claimed that there were two men who dragged her into a garage. There was an SA. However, when the doctors checked her out afterwards, there was no trace of anything physically as far as that went. So, I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. Very strange. And scratching down to the bone, that's hard to think unless you're in a state of psychosis.
Exactly. Yeah, it really makes you wonder, again, maybe if she had all of these, benzos, some of those are benzodiazepines, other medications in her system,
sure. Yeah.
Could they have exacerbated this issue? If she had been taking medication as prescribed, would she have been better? Does it have nothing to do with that? Was there somebody trying to make her look like she was losing her mind, and they ultimately took her life? That's
it. That's where I just go, wait a minute now, who? I wonder, as I'm reading all this, did they talk to any of the siblings? We'll have to look into that a little bit.
Sure.
I think she was the oldest.
We always hope maybe there will be an update to this. It's not that long ago, truly. So maybe, in the scheme of forensic science these days. So
right.
Maybe, again, when the police department spends almost $1.5 million investigating, we could still say, but were they really using those funds, to truly do investigative work? Or was that initially, and then after a fashion, they said, we'll put just, we won't really put a lot of effort into this. On paper we are, but
right.
It does make you wonder.
And the inquiry also was the most expensive in Canadian history.
Yes. That's what's even more astounding. Even more astounding.
These people couldn't come to any conclusion then either.
Right.
So,
Exactly. So that's the story of Cindy James. We invite you, as always, to dig around in this case, see what you figure out. Maybe there's a needle in the haystack. Maybe there's something that's yet to be discovered about this, or uncovered, I should say. And maybe there will be more to it. I hope so, for her family's sake, or people who loved her, or people who knew people who loved her. I hope they can get some resolution in some way.
Yeah, I hope so as well.
So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes of this, and we will dig up some more interesting tidbits about yet another bizarre, paranormal, unexplained kind of case. That's the story of Cindy James. So we hope you can learn something from that. I'm not sure what, but it's worthy of investigating.
Yeah, if you do, leave something in the comments for sure, because I always like to look at other viewpoints. So.
Right. See what people can conclude. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. And
thank you.
Thanks, and stay safe out there.